Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Clare Bernal? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Clare Bernal was born on July 25, 1983, and grew up in Tunbridge Wells, England. After attending Catholic school, Clare went to college and took courses on theater makeup and beauty consultancy. She found a job with the upscale department store chain Harvey Nichols, working in their flagship store located in the Knightsbridge neighborhood of central London. Her position was skincare consultant. Clare sold an expensive brand of skincare products from behind a counter. She moved to southeast London with two women who also worked at Harvey Nichols. Clare met a security guard at the store. His name was Michael Pesh. Michael had been born in Slovakia. He was a soldier in the Slovakian army and worked at the American embassy. Michael moved to London in 2003 to attend college. In 2004, he started working for Harvey Nichols. Michael was in the middle of a divorce, but this did not prevent him from wanting to start a new romantic relationship. He asked Clare out on a date. Clare agreed to go out with Michael, believing that the relationship would remain casual. She was just interested in having some fun. Michael paid several compliments to Clare, which at first she found to be flattering. After the first date, Michael told Clare that he loved her. Clare was alarmed and confused by how quickly Michael was trying to move the relationship forward. But she didn't want to give up on him completely. They went on 2 more dates together. Michael took a trip back to his home country of Slovakia. When he returned to London, he demanded that Clare meet him at the airport. She wasn't too happy about this because the flight arrived early in the morning, but Clare met him there anyway. Michael explained to Clare that he was carrying a heavy suitcase and did not want to drag it across London. He insisted on staying at her apartment for the night. Once he was in her apartment, he refused to leave. Eventually, Clare convinced him to depart by promising to walk him to the train station. When they arrived at the train station, Michael refused to board the train. At this point, Clare had enough. She told Michael their relationship had come to its conclusion. As she walked back to her apartment, Michael followed her. He stood outside her apartment and called her on the phone 20 times. The next day, he returned with flowers and stood outside the apartment again. Clare was amazed by how obsessed Michael was. Their entire romantic relationship involved just 3 dates over the course of 3 weeks. Over the next few months, Michael continued to stalk Clare. He called her frequently, he texted her up to 50 times a day, and he harassed her at work. Michael would stare at her and watch her by using mirrors in the store. He accused Clare of being cold toward him, and he regularly followed her home from work and stood outside her apartment. One day in February 2005, Clare walked out of the Harvey Nichols store after her shift ended. Michael approached her and grabbed her shoulder. He said that he loved her and he knew that she loved him too. She told him that she did not love him. Michael responded, quote, "Yes, you do, you stupid little girl," unquote. By this point, Clare was terrified. Her roommates were not too happy either. Despite this, Clare did not report Michael's behavior. She didn't tell her friends, her employer, or the police. There were many reasons for Clare's decision. She was embarrassed that she had selected such a poor romantic partner to date. She did not want Michael to get in trouble. She did not want him to get more angry. And Clare was concerned about wasting the time of the police. She convinced herself that because Michael had not really been physically violent, she could not prove anything against him. Only her roommates and her mother knew about what was happening to Clare. Michael's stalking behavior intensified over time. He continued to follow Clare home. He continued to send her text messages and call her. Michael told Clare that they were destined to be with each other and started acting as if they were still together romantically. For example, he wanted to know when they were going to celebrate their anniversary. Michael threatened to harm himself if Clare did not reconcile with him, and he said, "If I can't have you, no one will. On March 30, 2005, Michael once again boarded the same train as Clare on her way home from work. He sat across from her. When the train stopped, Clare tried to get away from Michael, but he pushed her to the ground. She threatened to notify the police. Michael moved his face close to Clare's face and said, quote, "If you report me, I'll kill you," unquote. Clare was more scared than ever. She decided to tell her employer about what happened. They moved Michael to a different floor of the department store, but he kept harassing Clare. Eventually, the store suspended him. Michael had asked one of his coworkers what the sentence for murder was. After this, the store urged Clare to report Michael to the police. She reluctantly agreed and supplied the police with a list of all the offenses Michael had committed. On April 6, 2005, Michael was fired from Harvey Nichols and was arrested by the police. One of his conditions for bail was not to have any contact with Clare. After Michael's arrest, Clare and her roommates decided to move to a new apartment in the same neighborhood to get away from him. A few days later, as Clare was preparing to move, she was mortified to find Michael standing outside of her apartment. She called the police, but Michael was gone by the time they arrived. On April 10, 2005, Michael showed up at Clare's new apartment. Clare called the police. When they arrived, Michael was nowhere to be seen. The police drove Clare around the neighborhood in order to find Michael. She spotted him and pointed him out to the police. As they handcuffed Michael, he looked directly at Clare and smiled. Michael Pesch was charged with threatening to kill Clare and released on bail 9 days later. He returned to his home country of Slovakia and purchased a Luger pistol after completing a training course to obtain a firearm license. Michael returned to London on August 11. He was carrying the pistol in his luggage. On August 31, 2005, Michael went to court to face the charge that he threatened Clare. Ultimately, Michael pleaded guilty to harassment, and the threatening charge was dismissed. He was immediately granted bail as a pre-sentence evaluation was ordered. The conviction of Michael led Clare to believe that her nightmare was over. Now everyone knew that Michael was guilty, and he would not be allowed to contact her in any way. Clare looked forward to having peace and tranquility in her life. Unfortunately, this case went in a completely different direction. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Tuesday, September 13, 2005, 22-year-old Clare Bernal was at work as usual. At around 7:50 p.m., just 10 minutes before the store was going to close, Michael entered the store through a back door. He did this despite store security being advised not to permit him in the store. He was under the effects of cocaine and carrying the Luger pistol. As Clare was standing at her skincare counter, Michael crept up behind her, pointed the pistol at her head, and fired 1 time. After she dropped to the floor, Michael fired 3 more shots into her face. He pointed the pistol at the ceiling and fired 1 time before using a 6th and final round to bring his life to a conclusion. Clare Bernal did not survive the attack. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts in a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. The officer who handled Clare's case was young, overwhelmed by paperwork, and did not have sufficient domestic violence training. Despite this, the police denied any responsibility for the tragic outcome in this case. They claimed it was impossible to predict what Michael was going to do. Even if they had done everything correctly, Michael would have been designated as low risk due to his lack of a criminal record. The challenge to the position of the police in this case is that after Michael was arrested for threatening Clare, he disregarded the conditions of his bail by stalking her. It didn't matter if he had a criminal history or not. Michael clearly demonstrated he was unwilling to stop. This should have been enough to keep him in jail. Furthermore, why was he allowed to enter the United Kingdom with a pistol? I imagine that he simply hid the gun effectively, but considering Michael's history, the authorities should have scrutinized him carefully before allowing him back into the country. Item number 2. Throughout Clare's ordeal, she desperately wanted to avoid getting Michael in trouble. She simply wanted him to stop harassing her. Clare wasn't interested in him losing his job or him being punished in any other way. She wasn't vindictive. She wasn't trying to make an example out of him. Michael could have simply walked away, and that would have been the end of it. Instead, he refused to stop harassing her and continued to escalate. Item number 3, Claire was embarrassed about being attracted to Michael. She was worried that people would think less of her for exercising poor judgment. This, combined with other reasons, led to her being reluctant to report him. This is a dynamic that stalkers use to their advantage, sometimes unwittingly. Stalking victims tend to worry about the social awkwardness and bizarre behavior of the stalker being transmitted over to them. Like the stalker is so awkward that even being associated with them becomes embarrassing. The stronger this dynamic becomes, the less likely the victim will report the offense. The stalker gets rewarded for acting in an extreme way and expressing a lack of insight. In addition, the police tend to play into this embarrassment dynamic by treating the obsessive behavior as a normal part of young romance. They see people all the time who have intense romantic feelings, but do not commit any type of serious offense. This mindset makes it easy for them to dismiss reports of stalking. Now moving to my final item, number 4. What type of stalker was Michael Pesch? This is just a theory, my opinion. One way of classifying stalkers divides them into 5 types. Many stalkers fall into multiple categories at the same time, and they can move between types throughout their stalking career. As I review these types, I will use the example of a man who is stalking a woman because that's the most common scenario. The first type of stalker is the intimacy stalker. Here the man did not have any prior relationship with the woman before engaging in the stalking behavior. He convinced himself that the victim was actually in love with him, but she was not able to verbally reciprocate the sentiment because of societal restrictions. Many stalkers of this type are delusional. Michael had a lack of insight consistent with this type of stalker, but other than that, this type is not a good match for his behavior. The second type of stalker is the incompetent suitor. This type of stalker is looking for a casual relationship. He can be discouraged by being adamant and is typically not dangerous. Michael was impossible to discourage and was extremely dangerous, so this is not a good match. Type 3 is the rejected stalker. Here the man cannot accept the end of the romantic relationship with the victim. He repeatedly harasses the woman with both threats and overly sentimental attempts to reconcile. This matches Michael fairly well. Type number 4 is the resentful stalker. This is when the offender intimidates and terrorizes a former lover to regain power and control. This is a particularly dangerous type of stalking, which often involves harassment, vandalism, and trying to destroy the victim's reputation. There is some overlap between this type and Michael's behavior. The last type, number 5, is the predatory stalker. This is when the man prepares for an attack in various ways, including through the use of covert surveillance. This is the most dangerous type. Michael's behavior fits with this type fairly well. I think that when looking at all of Michael's behavior, he was probably a combination of a rejected, resentful, and predatory stalker. He progressed through the characteristics associated with these types at a frightening pace, based on an obsession over a 3-week relationship comprising only 3 dates. Michael was fixated on Claire to such a degree he was willing to destroy her at any cost, even his own life. Those are my thoughts on the case of Clare Bernal. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.